I loved your movie. I checked it out, The Sacred Cow. Congratulations on that. Can you talk about some of the dangers and some of the issues of like monocropping and those kinds of things?
Yeah, very early in thinking about the paleo diet stuff, like, and again, this was like early 2000s, like 2001, 2002. I was having a discussion with a person who is vegan, and they were talking about like the sustainability features of our food system. And I started really thinking about that. And I was kind of like, man, grass-fed meat is kind of free money, because you want the sun to fall on the earth, and you want that sun to grow vegetation, and you want herbivores to consume at least some of that vegetation, because that's part of the evolutionary dynamic of our planet, since some sort of like vertebrate land animals have been here. So I started thinking about that, and it's a lot to unpack. Like they call processes like this a life cycle analysis. Like it is this thing as a drinking receptacle better than a bunch of plastic bottles? And it's not entirely obvious. You've got some stainless steel, you've got some plastic. The steel you need to mine, and then you need to refine it and process it and ship it here and do it there. And then you got a plastic gizmo, and there's all the energy that goes into that. But it's funny, when you do a life cycle analysis on something, there's a lot of plastic bottles that get represented by this one thing. So people will say, well, do a more permanent bottle because it's better for the environment. It's tough because none of us want like plastic bottles all over our beaches or in the water, just strewn around the street.
Yeah, I hear that glass is actually the most efficient.
Say that again.
Glass is the most efficient, I believe.
Glass is kind of the most efficient.
Kind of a pain in the ass to utilize.
And it's the stuff breaks and all that stuff. And so it's this topic around food and sustainability, I've known would be a thing for a long time, like 15, 20 years. But I also, for good or ill, I tend to be really early with stuff. And I knew I was early on the sustainability topic. My friend Diana Rogers, who really spearheaded both the book and the film, she wanted to do this thing 10 years ago. And I'm like, there's no audience. Like nobody's interested. Nobody even knows about this. Like there's just worried about abs and skinny jeans and losing some weight like that. That's it. And we've got to wait for this market to kind of grow. And as the potential interest grew, also the flip side of this grew, this tying of animal husbandry to climate change has grown and grown and grown. And now it's really easy to find rhetoric from seemingly credible sources like the World Health Organization, the World Economic Forum, that say that the singular greatest input to climate change, like greenhouse gas emissions, is animal husbandry. And it looks very august and legit, and it is a lie. I mean, it is a bald-faced lie. Like transportation is the greatest contributor in this story, and even in that situation, like there's a lot of detail and nuance to all this stuff. But Diana and I got in to write this book to address the environmental, ethical, and health considerations of a meat-inclusive food system. And so there's specifically on that environmental topic, there are claims about how much greenhouse gas emissions are caused by grazing animals. And there's a claim, and then there's the reality, and the difference is enormous. And there's also a deeper story there, which biological systems, the fact that we are all still alive and breathing, we are greenhouse gas emitters. Every time we exhale, we release carbon dioxide. I kind of think that's a good thing, and as part of a global carbon cycle, it's kind of a non-issue. Where this has gotten really dangerous is demonizing all greenhouse gas emissions has painted us into a really dangerous spot. Termites release enormous amounts of greenhouse gas. Wow. Shellfish on the ocean floor release enormous amounts of greenhouse gas. That is good. It is not part of the climate change story. These are parts of natural systems that release greenhouse gases, resequester greenhouse gases, and it's a lot to unpack it. It's far more complex than even telling the story about a multi-use bottle versus a plain plastic bottle, but it's just as important. But the narrative is very stilted against animal husbandry, and we actually make the case in there that there's research that suggests, and maybe it's wrong, but this is what we really need to get in and have some discussions about it. There's research that suggests that properly utilized grazing animals could remove far more carbon dioxide and more carbon equivalents from the atmosphere than what is being put into it. That's a little bit speculative. We need to do more work on that front. There is one thing that is absolutely certain, which is that properly utilized grazing animals can reverse desertified areas. We documented like the guy down in the Chihuahuan Desert that has reversed 1 million acres of the Chihuahuan Desert has been converted back into grassland. This is productive area that now produces food. It retains water instead of just getting washed into the ocean, all the topsoil getting washed away. And that itself has a remarkable favorable impact on climate change. And it is literally the only tool that we have to affect this type of change. There's other pieces to this, which, is really kind of crazy, but the current row crop system has an expiration date on it because it's destroying our topsoil. And nobody knows exactly how long that thing is going to go on. But once the topsoil is gone, that's it. And surprisingly, a way that you can regrow topsoil is by using grazing animals properly. Like that whole process grows topsoil. So there's some interesting synergy that could happen there. And Alan Savory made the case that we think that properly used grazing animals can remove more carbon equivalents than what they release. But even if they don't, and even if they release 10 times, 100 times more greenhouse gases than what we think they do, the fact that it can reverse desertification and the fact that this is the only tool we have to reverse the loss of topsoil, you still have to use animals in a food system.
What would you hope that a group of vegans that checked out your movie, what would you hope that they gain from your film?
There was a line in there that, and I'm not sure if it made it in the film, it may have been separate, but Joel Salatin was giving a talk publicly, and there were some vegan folks there, and they said, well, you mainly raise animals. What about us? We don't eat animals. And Joel is like, no, I raise food. I raise both animal and plant food. And he said, if you let me raise the food to feed my family the way I want to, I promise you I will raise enough food for you to feed your family the way you want to. And that's the thing that I would want vegan folks and really everybody at this point to take away. And it goes a big step above and beyond what we're doing with our food systems, but to allow people to be the human beings that they want to be. And if somebody's being a horrible bastard, then okay, we need to address that. But we're in this time where if the Venn diagram that is you and the Venn diagram is me, if they don't perfectly overlap, whatever my overlaps are, like those things need to be destroyed or trimmed away or attacked. And I think that could unravel civilization as we know it. Like I have legitimate anxiety around that. And I've been early enough and right enough with sufficient things that I put possibly undue stock in my opinion in this, but it's really scary. And so that would be the thing that I would want, like some conscientious vegans who are concerned about animals, concerned about the environment, give this notion that there are other ways of doing things a shot. And maybe also leave some space for people to live that isn't in 100% synergy with the way that you're living, because you would want that type of reciprocity in your own life. We would all like that type of opportunity to just kind of, live the lives that we basically want to live and not have this kind of Orwellian oversight in every element of our lives.
What is your stance on, somebody that's going vegan for health purposes and or environmental purposes, and then in addition to that would be, I guess, that ethical side?
Yeah.
What are some of your thoughts on that?
The health piece is tough. Like you can navigate a vegan diet effectively, but you have to be in a position where you can supplement vigorously. Like you're going to need most people are going to need some EPA, DHA, either from like marine source or something like that. Some folks have genetics that allow them to convert the short chain omega-3 fats into the elongated forms, but not everybody does. And those things tend to decrease with age. And we detail this in the book, within vegan and vegetarian populations, iron, zinc, and B vitamin deficiencies are pretty endemic. And there was just a study that came out of Finland looking at families raising their children vegan, and the children are failing to thrive. They have failure to thrive in multiple different arenas. And this is in a wealthy, well-educated Western society in Finland, where these people they were incredibly easy to work with, because what's that kind of joke, who's going to tell you what they do, a vegan or a CrossFitter? And if it's a vegan CrossFitter, they'll tell you, these folks were really committed to working with these scientists because they really believe in their way of life. And it's not going well for these kids. So if you are an adult and you want to eat this way, fine, just really pay attention to your supplementations, and clinically pay attention to what's going on, and if you start having some problems, maybe ask some questions around what you want to do with that. I think it's incredibly unethical to feed children a vegan diet. Different iterations of vegetarian diet you might be able to get away with a little bit better, but there's still great research that suggests that the kids from vegetarian families have less. They fail to thrive less or more frequently than mixed diet folks. When you get into the ethical side of this story, nothing in biology exists without death. Life cannot exist without death. If everything just continued living, we would just pile up with, bodies, I guess, until they ran out of food or what have you. In the book, I don't think we really cover this in the film, but we have this story called Grass World, where you look at what would happen if you only had grass. Well, grass can't exist just by itself. It needs something to interact with, specifically grazing animals. Well, could you have a planet that is just grass and cows? No, because the cows overpopulate the planet and destroy the grass, and the whole thing craters. So like you would at least need like grass, cows, and like wolves or something. And even that is a very unstable ecosystem. It would be easy to break that thing. But when you look at the food that is produced from industrial row crop methods, which is still the way that the bulk of the food is raised for veganism, and when we're talking about being able to feed a global population, people will say, well, you can't feed a global population with animal products. And my point is that you can include animal products. Like it doesn't need to be the backbone of the whole thing, but surely it can play a role in it, just like it has throughout all of our history thus far. But you certainly can't feed a global population with a no-till permaculture farm that it has no animal inputs in it, like a vegan farm. And lots and lots and lots of animals and other organisms die in the process of doing something like that. I don't know how you make equivalent, like one life versus another. A cow and a mouse, they're actually genetically remarkably similar. They're both mammals. One is much larger than the other one, but their intelligence is similar. Their reproductive capacity is similar. Which one is more valuable? I don't know, but lots of rodents are killed in the industrial row crop food system. The grain silos where this stuff is stored is fumigated to kill huge amounts of rodents, because otherwise, rats and mice and similar critters would eat most of this stuff. And there have been analysis around this, and there's an argument to be made that more animals are killed in the industrial row crop food system than would be killed in a system that is based on grass, large grazing animals, fruits, vegetables, roots, tubers, and nuts, which sounds a whole lot like a paleo diet, surprisingly. So there was a professor out of Oregon State University that did this piece. It's called the least harm principle. And nobody has really refuted this. Like it's very solid work. And so people will say, well, if you eat a steak, then you killed it with intention, and I didn't have the intention, so I shouldn't be blamed for any animals that are killed in the making of my tofu or my corn tortilla or whatever. And I find that even less ethical. It's like, at least own the fact that you are part of the death of these organisms, and I could make the case that at least eating the animals directly versus just exterminating them and plowing them underground or something is maybe a more ethical thing, but those things get kind of dodgy. And then the environmental piece, I mean, I touched on a little bit of that. There's just a lot of dubious claims around land use, water use, the amount of food that goes into producing, say, like grazing animals, like cattle in particular. Even conventionally raised cows spend 70% of their life on grass, and it wouldn't be that hard to shift most of that process over to mainly grass. And even in that story, to the degree that our row crop systems still function as well as it does, usually what happens is like a field of corn or a field of wheat will be harvested, and then cattle are allowed to go through and graze on the residues left over there, and they pee and poo and renutrify the soil and break up the soil. And this is actually a really important feature of even the conventional model that we have going on right now. And so you can't just remove those cows. You shouldn't really remove those cows. Some people will say, well, just let them live and then let them die a natural life. But when they get old, it's kind of like looking at old people in a rest home, like they have health problems and orthopedic issues. And is it more ethical to let them die in a ditch after they've broken a leg? Or, it just like raises all these kind of crazy ethical considerations. So I don't know if I did a great job answering your question. You had a really good question, but it's a massive amount of material. When we turned in the book Sacred Cow, it was 600 pages long, and the editors whittled it down to about 300 pages, and they actually did a really good job. I was very happy with what they had left. But these three topics, the environmental, ethical, and health considerations of a meat-inclusive food system, there are hundreds of books written on each one of these subcategories, but nobody has really gotten in and done a synthesis project trying to tie all that stuff together. And I do feel like we make a very compelling case that at a minimum, that there's a lot more to this story than what we're being told.